Okay, I think we can start. I don't want to delay. Um, I don't want to delay those that have already joined. And I'll start off with the introduction, and others can join us as we move on ahead. So I have the pleasure of having Heather Fraser in the session today. I've been aching to have her come speak to us, and busy schedule for herself and busy schedule for myself. So, but it's just an honor to have her here. She was in my formal place where I work, Dalhousie University. She was not my boss; she was my boss's boss. So, to have her agree to come here is really an honor, and I'm really glad that we can tap into our wealth of experience. She's been recruiting for many, many years. She's managed so many people here. She's mentored, she's coached. She does a lot in the PMI environment. And I'm trying to see if we can take a little bit of that experience and bring it to the business analysis space, especially in respect to Career Aid Up. So everybody, you are welcome to this session. We'll get it started and start rolling now. And just a few housekeeping. This webinar should run for about an hour or less, depending on the amount of questions. And I would really appreciate if we can remain muted and have our videos turned off throughout the presentation, just so that we can save bandwidth and we don't distract ourselves. If you have a question, please put it in the main chat, and I will ensure that we read it out to Heather before when it's time to read out the questions. This video would still be available on YouTube, on the Career Aid Up YouTube page, and you can always go there to review or share with those that you think will benefit from it. Career Aid Up is a group of professionals dedicated to supporting Black and visible minorities, helping them to succeed in their career, and also in doing that, contributing to the socioeconomic growth of our community. Our mission is to provide a hub where our community members can network, learn, and grow in all their career. We offer training like we're doing now. Let me just minimize this a bit. Yeah, so we offer training. We also offer coaching and mentoring services. We started from the Kishan Goodman Library, and due to COVID, we had to move online. We also help with resume reviews, mock interviews, which some of you have attended, webinars, and internship opportunities if those or when those are available. And our specialties in business analysis, project management, change management, agile, business intelligence and data analytics, and product management. So that's that for us. I would leave it to Heather now so she can take over the webinar and we can learn from our wealth of experience. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Harry. Let me do this. It says that I'm not able to share my screen.
I've actually enabled that.
How's that? Nope. How's that?
Oh yeah, beautiful. It's up now.
Okay. So just so that you all know, I have the slide deck beside me. I'm not being rude if I'm looking aside. I'm here by myself. There's nobody distracting me. You have my full attention. I am just working from two screens. So I think the honor is all mine of being here. Harry talked to me about this a long time ago before he left Dalhousie. And as I grabbed his ankles and tried to prevent him from leaving us, he asked if this is something I would be interested in doing. And of course it is. This is something that I love to do, is to meet new people and talk about my experience and your experience and the Canadian experience. And, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. I'll I'll do a quick run through of who I am, and then I've got some slides to share with you. It can kind of look overwhelming. There's a lot of words on them, but I'm going to talk through them. And really what I'm trying to do is create some conversation pieces so that you can ask questions and we can have a little chat after that. So yeah, my name is Heather Fraser. I've been working in this industry for about 20 something years now. I know you don't think I look old enough, but trust me, I have 3 older children, so I'm just kidding. I started my career, I went to St. Mary's University and I did my undergraduate degree there, a Bachelor of Commerce. I actually did international business, so it was interesting doing a little bit of research for this presentation because it brought me back to my 20 or so year old academic roots, where I did a lot on, international differences in culture, and I did a lot of study on that. But anyway, I spent the first part of my career doing project management in the print industry. So doing like travel and tourism magazines of all things for different parts of Canada. When my second child was born, I left work and I stayed home for a few years. And then I went back into project management, but this time in the IT industry. And that was, 14 years ago or something, 16 years ago, maybe. And I've been in IT ever since, even though I'm not actually an IT person. I guess I would consider myself one now because I've been here for so long. I always tell people I'm not a real IT person. I just play one on TV. But really, I worked my way through different IT project management positions. I went back to St. Mary's as an employee several 10, 12 years ago, and I ended up managing their project management office there. I came to Dell as the director of the project management office, and now I'm the director of our enterprise application services in ITS. So my path has not been traditional to be at a director level in an IT shop, but it's important, especially for those of you on this call who are in project management and business analysis. My path here was through project management. And relationship management and leadership. And that's what brought me to where I am today. So I do live just outside of Halifax. I do work at Dalhousie. I have 3 children, and I'm married to an engineer, which makes for a lot of interesting conversations in our house, project manager being married to an engineer. So 3 things that I prepared tonight, again, to start a bit of a conversation. And this comes from a chat I had with Harry when I was preparing for this, just about, what kind of things do you want me to talk about? What would be interesting? I can talk a lot. People don't always want to hear everything I have to say. And I know some of you are currently employed in Canada. Some of you are looking for a job in Canada. So I've kept this kind of high level and treating it as tips and tricks just for landing a job, thriving in a job in the Canadian workplace culture. We're also going to talk a little bit about some myth busting in the Canadian workplace. And it's really just, I'm going to go through some kind of top 10, cultural values, cultural norms that you would find in the Canadian workplace that you might not find in a different country, or might be wildly different from the country that you are coming from. So, and then at the end, of course, any questions that you have, I'm happy to talk through those. Okay. A lot of words on the screen. You don't have to read them all. I'm going to talk you through it. So the first step, obviously, is applying for jobs. I am keeping this really high level. Harry and I talked, even before he left Dell, when we were talking about this, and I have hired. Yep. Oh, no. Was there a question there, or?
No, sorry, that was someone came up, but we've taken care of that. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So I've hired a lot of people in my career. I've interviewed so many people. I can't even tell you, through a lot of different positions that I've held in management and leadership. And I've read probably 1,000 resumes. Harry asked me a long time ago if I would be willing to speak to things that I look for as a hiring manager, or things that are important in this environment when you are applying for a job. in IT or in, the project management or business analysis field. So if you can focus on the five W's, if you've ever heard of that, the who, what, when, where, and why, focus on who you are. Employers really want to know who you are, not personally, not all your personal information. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but professionally, because if you're looking at jobs and you think, okay, well, there's 25 jobs that are posted today, I'm just going to apply for all of them. Just going to throw my resume in there. Something is bound to stick. Employers really want to know, why did you want to come to Canada? Did you bring your family with you? What is important to you in a job? What have you spent your career doing? What are you passionate about? They really want to know who you are, what you're looking for in your next role, how you're building your career, what you're really passionate about, what you're really good at. Try to find ways to have that come through in your resume. When you're available to start is a really big topic of conversation, particularly now in the hiring space where it has gotten a lot more competitive to hire employees these days. So if you are in the process of coming to Canada, that's fine. If you're already here and you can start right away, that's great. If you're already here and you're moving from another job, I need 4 weeks notice. That's an important criteria for you to consider. Where have you settled? Are you available to work on site? Are you available for remote working? Also a newer topic of conversation post-pandemic, as I'm sure you're all very aware of. And this is a new world for Dalhousie in particular, where pre-pandemic, we were all on campus 100% of the time. Working at home was not a thing. We are navigating now into a new hybrid workplace and taking the good and the bad that has been coming with that. And why you're interested in this position. This is something that I think a lot of people lose sight of when they're applying for jobs. Like I said earlier, you find 25 jobs that were posted, you apply for all of them. Make it meaningful. Choose a job that means something to you, that you think you'd be good at, a place where you can see you're bringing value. And it's not uncommon for you to be asked in an interview or in a screening interview, why have you applied for this job? And you hopefully have a really good answer for that, not just, I need the money. Okay. These are just some other considerations that I put in here, and this ties to the 25 job things. Really, really hone in on your resume and your cover letter. Always provide a cover letter. I have been guilty before in competitions where I've had 150 applicants of just not even reading a resume if there's no cover letter attached, because the cover letter is where you learn about the person, why they want to work here, what they bring to the organization, and so on. But really align your skills to the job. So if you're a project manager in banking and you're applying for a job as a project manager in IT, there's a lot of transferable skills there, and highlight your project management skills. Don't highlight how good you are at banking, because that's not going to be as relevant and it's not going to bubble to the top. Make sure you can present yourself in a way that the person reading your resume can see, oh, I see how they've connected into this job description. They know what this is about and they want to come work here. Take an inventory of technical skills, whether that's project management, programming, anything else, but also your soft skills are very important. In the Canadian workplace, soft skills a lot of times are what gets a person hired over their technical skills that make them actually qualified for the job. So we can talk about that a little bit later, but relationship building, emotional intelligence, all of the parts of being an employee that go beyond your work experience and so on. And do your research in the organization. Again, if you're applying for 25 jobs on a single day, you are, I can't do that. You're probably not taking the time to actually look at what that position is about and what the organization is about. Do your research on that. Before you even get to an interview, do your research about the company, about the culture. Is this a place I want to work? Is this a place I want to be associated with? Do they share my values? Those are important things for you to ask yourself before you apply for a job. Okay, so you've applied for the jobs, you've got an interview. And if you did all of those things right, you're probably going to have more than one interview. These are some tips and tricks of areas where I've seen people, whether they have immigrated to Canada or they're native born Canadians. These are tips and tricks for anybody going through an interview process. And I've seen some of these done really poorly, which is why they bubbled to the surface when I thought about putting this together. In Canada, it's very common to have a multi-stage interview. So that could be a screening phone call at first to kind of screen out candidates to ensure, the top 10 most qualified would go forward for an interview or what have you. It's also common to have a two-step interview where we've recently interviewed for a project management position here at Dell in my team. The first interview was all about their qualifications, their experience, the background. Their second interview was a full-blown project plan where a situation was given to the candidate before their second interview, and they had to, from start to finish, build out a project plan and any other important documents that they found was relevant. So that is just another way of kind of weeding out and really seeing what people's potential are. So be prepared for that. I will say that some of the interviews, even if you have two or more, usually they're fairly short. You wouldn't normally see 3 or 4 4-hour long interviews. That's just not how we do it. I've mentioned this already, map your skills and attributes to the job description before you get into the interview. So you better be very familiar with what that job description is asking you and be able to translate your experience into what they're asking for. And if you've done that in advance, your responses will come out far more naturally because you're in the right mindset of what is in that job description and how do I map to that. Be concise. Most interviews that we do, and I think this is fairly normal in this environment, they're 60 to 90 minutes long. And we have anywhere between 10 and 15 questions. So if you do some quick math on that, you've got a few minutes, up to 5 minutes to answer a question. This is a skill test, actually, because if you know your stuff, if you've mapped your skills to what we're looking for, and you're confident, you've managed your soft skills, all of those things, you should be able to answer a question concisely in a few minutes. If you don't, and you don't know what you're talking about, and you start to panic, you get very nervous, which happens to everybody, then your answers can become long and drawn out, and the interviewers have a very difficult time deciphering what you're trying to show them. Prepare yourself for common questions. I can guarantee you will get some of these. What has brought you to Dalhousie University? Tell us how your skill set has mapped to this job. Why Dalhousie? Why now? If we asked your former coworkers what your 3 greatest strengths would be, what would they say? Those are very common questions. You can Google those, you can look them up. Usually you're going to get at least a couple of those. And those are kind of some quick wins that you can be really prepared for and can kind of build a little bit of confidence in a situation that most people are nervous through. Come with a list of questions for the interview. This ties back to doing your research beforehand. You want to show them that you want to work there. And the questions can be as detailed as how many people work in this team and you know, I don't know. You could do anything around the organization. You could talk about the, company projects, the politics of the company, not politics, but the kind of culture and internal mechanisms of the organization. Just come prepared with a list of those. Even if you have 10 and you kind of decide through the interview which 2 or 3 you're going to ask, it's really helpful to show the interviewers that you're engaged and that this is a place that you want to work. Be on time. We're going to talk about that in one of the myths a little bit later. It's very, very important. If you're 15 minutes late for an interview, chances are you're not going to be interviewed. So if I had a lot of time in this presentation, I would give you real world examples of all of these things that I've experienced gone wrong. But we don't. But if you're curious later, ask me some questions about it. Address all interviewers equally. I've had situations where a candidate has come into the room and it seems they're trying to determine who the boss is in the situation, and they'll guess wrong, or, just treat everybody equally. It doesn't matter in that interview who's the boss, what department they're from. The important thing for you to know is that they're all part of that interview panel because they have relevance in the position that is being hired. So I would just come in, greet them all equally, and not really pay as much attention into the hierarchy or other positions that are in the room with you, which is a hard thing to do sometimes. And the final one is just kind of a logistics thing for every person applying for a job. Make sure you know where you're going. Make sure you know how long it takes you to get there. If you don't have a car, make sure there's a bus or an Uber that can get you there on time. I've even done myself. For a place that I was interviewing for and I wasn't quite sure where it was, I went the day before and I made sure I could park in a place. If you take care of all of that, it's going to make you feel hopefully less nervous by the time you get there and get started. Okay, we're rolling right along here. So you've applied for the job. You had a stellar interview. Everyone loved you. You were the preferred candidate. Now you've got this job. And sometimes maybe that's not what you were expecting. You get into your new workplace. Maybe you haven't been in Canada for a long time, or maybe you have been, but the culture in your former workplace is very different than where you are now. So we're going to talk a lot about the Canadian culture in the next little bit. But these are just some tips and tricks that can help you get the best out of your new job and to thrive in your new environment. Always keep in mind that the culture in Canada is different than every other country that you have lived in or worked in. There's a couple of pretty big ones that, again, we're going to talk about after. Building relationships is a critical component of success in the Canadian workplace. I know it is in every country in the world, but particularly in Canada, there is so much emphasis on positive relationships, soft skills, being able to foster and nurture relationships, having a positive work experience with those that are around you or that you work with on a regular day. Another important thing that will help everybody starting a new job is to ask questions. In this culture in particular, people love to help. We are really polite and we are really helpful. Ask questions, ask for help. Say, I've never done this before. Can you show me how to do it? There's no shame or dishonor in doing that. In fact, it's encouraged. I know for the folks that work in my team, I would much rather them come into my office and say, that thing you asked me to do, could you just run through that with me? Because I've never done it before and I want to make sure I do it right. I would much rather that than them sit at their desk for 8 hours, worried that they don't know how to do something. So ask questions, ask for help, start embedding yourself into that environment. Build a picture of what your new workplace culture is and figure out how much you want or need to adapt. And we're going to talk about this in the next slide, I think, just a little bit as an intro to the myth section. But what I mean by that is, there are cultural differences regardless of where you come from, whether you're coming from outside of Canada, from a different province into Nova Scotia. Even within Nova Scotia, there's cultural differences. I'm from Cape Breton Island. When I moved to Halifax, there were differences there. So get an idea in your mind of that culture, how you align to that. Does it align with your own values as an individual? And how much of your own culture and identity do you want and need to adapt to that? And we'll talk about more about that in a little bit. And like I said a moment ago, is that job what you thought it was going to be? I would like to think that if you've taken all of the steps beforehand, done your research, learned about the job, really mapped yourself to it, learned about the culture, asked the right questions in the interview, you should have a fairly good sense of what this job is going to be. But once you're in it, do a little bit of reflection and really think, is this what I thought it was going to be? If not, what needs to shift? What needs to adapt? Maybe I talk to my manager about it. Maybe I just need to learn a little bit more. And there's always a lot of things that you can do there. Okay, so Canadian work culture, myth busting. You don't have to read this whole quote. Well, you can if you like. It's an interesting one. It's from an article in Maclean's magazine that's probably about 10 years old now. But I used this article in one of my MBA courses a couple of years ago because it talked a lot about multiculturalism and how Canada has traditionally positioned itself as a mosaic, in contrast to America being a melting pot, where people come into the country and they're forced to assimilate into the American culture. I can't speak to that. I've never worked in the United States, but this is traditionally how the two countries have been positioned when it comes to immigration, workplace culture, and so on. In Canada, this mosaic concept came about around the 70s, and it was based in political culture. The politics at the time were that, the politicians who were trying to gain power in the country were trying to accomplish two things. They were trying to give Canadians the perception of elitism for being a better country than their American counterparts when it comes to welcoming folks from other countries into Canada to work, which may or may not have been true. It just depends on who you're talking to at the time. Remember, this was the 70s. The other thing they were trying to accomplish was for immigrants who were coming into Canada, they were trying to position this to gain political favor and have more people support them as they're coming into the country. So anyway, it wasn't until about the 90s that there was some real research done. And it turns out that from a realistic perspective, Canada is neither a melting pot nor a mosaic. We're kind of somewhere in between, where we really value the diverse cultures, the different ways of the world, and the value that brings into the Canadian workplace, economy, society, while at the same time, there is an expectation that anybody coming into Canada will align with some of the cultural norms that are in the Canadian workplace. Maybe that's a case of you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But I just thought that was an interesting article when I read it those few years ago. And so I did bring that into this because it kind of lines up with the myth section that I'm going to talk about next. If anybody wants to read that article, I can send out the link to Harry after the fact, but you can find it in Maclean's. Okay. So now what we're going to do is go through 10 myths. I don't know if they're all myths. They might be. And I had to word them in a way that they were myths. So some of them might be kind of silly, but really what this is about is 10 Canadian cultural workplace norms that some people might not know exist when they come to Canada or they're preparing to come to Canada. Myth number 1, Canadian workplace culture is every man for himself. That is not the case. The emphasis when you're working at an place of employment in Canada is team before individual. If you've ever heard the expression, there's no I in team, I'm sure that was born in Canada, because that is how all of the work is done. And so as a manager, I am more interested, well, before I say this, I'm interested in the success of those who report to me, but I'm more interested in the success of the team. There's a very high value placed on an individual's ability to work within a team. So that ties back to your interview skills as well. You need to be able to demonstrate that you can thrive in a team environment. I had an interview with a man one time where the question was something about what is your preferred work environment? And he said, I like to work by myself with my door closed all day long. So that didn't fly very well because the position he was being hired for or interviewing for was an entire team-based structure, and the success of the team was the most important factor. So participative and collaborative management and leadership models. If you ever want to read a whole lot of boring theory, read about Canadian leadership, soft skills, approach leadership. There's a lot in there, but it's really how things work when you're working in a Canadian organization. Busted that myth. Myth number 2, Canadians love to share personal information. This is not really true to an extent. I mean, just at the beginning of this conversation, I told you all a little bit about me, and I have 3 children. That's not the kind of private information I'm talking about here. Topics like your health, your marriage or marital status, depending on the situation, how much money you make, how much money you have, how much your house cost, religion. There are a few topics that you will find, if you haven't already, Canadians tend to not talk about. Definitely is seen as private information. And that doesn't mean to say it's never talked about, but usually that is something that comes in the form of strong relationship building. You've worked with somebody for a long time and you get to know each other really well to a friendship level. That's a different situation. But on day one, when you come into an interview, I would tend to avoid these topics. I can't speak to why that is that way. When you really think about it, it's kind of weird. These are human elements that are attributed to every human being on the planet. But this is basically a cultural norm. Try to not talk about those things or ask people about those things. Oh, your face is really pale today. Are you sick? You look terrible. Or I heard a rumor that your husband's a bit of a jerk. Is your marriage on the rocks? Wouldn't want to ask anything like that. And that goes the other way as well. Do not put your personal information, anything along those lines, on your employment documents. Of course, when you are hired, there's personal information that has to go into your employee file. That's not what I'm talking about. But I've had resumes that have come into me with 20 lines of personal information, marital status, religious views, sexual orientation. I'm not kidding. It was all listed on a person's resume. And I thought it was, on one hand, refreshing because not every culture is as inward as Canadian culture is, but definitely not necessary. And in some cases could cause offense if that comes in. So just keep in mind some topics in the early days are a little bit off limits. Myth number 3, rank and titles rule. I know in a lot of cultures, hierarchy, titles, your rank in an organization is the be all and end all. It's not as much here. I kind of combine 2 different things into this, but and it in other cultures, I know it's a way of showing respect is if you address somebody by their formal title. Also not so much in the Canadian workplace. I don't think I've ever been addressed by my title since I started working at Dow. And that's because people call me Heather. It doesn't matter where in the organization they fit or I fit. My name is Heather and that's what they call me. We don't go by titles. The exception to that would be in a more formal situation. I put Dr. Saini on here. He's the president of Dalhousie. If I walk into a meeting with Dr. Saini, I'm going to call him Dr. Saini, but I'm not going to call him president and vice chancellor of Dalhousie University. So we don't put a lot of stress or values on titles, particularly when addressing somebody, like I just said. And it's not necessary or actually appropriate in most situations to behave subserviently to somebody who's on a higher position than you in the hierarchy. even if there is a hierarchy in an organization, it's very uncommon for you to change your behavior based on where you fit, and who is above you. So we busted that myth. Oh, that's a little blurry when I look at it on a big screen. Sorry about that. I don't know if you've ever read Dilbert cartoons, but for the employee environment, sometimes they're pretty funny. Myth number 4, personal space is meant to be invaded. Totally not true in Canada. Canadians tend to like their personal space. I'm laughing because I don't know where this has come from in the Canadian culture. And I think most people coming into Canada find this is a little bit bizarre. We are not a cold culture. We're a cold country. We're not a cold culture. But Canadians really value their personal space. And that extends also to belonging. So if you're in a room and people's stuff is everywhere and you started picking it all and collecting it all, people might get offended by that, which again seems a little bit silly. But or touching somebody, touching their hand, touching their back, that in a best case scenario would make somebody uncomfortable, and in a worst case scenario someone would get very offended. And it could be a real deal breaker in a relationship with that person. So, or feel threatened. That's another one that's, I guess, part of this, but just wanted to put that one out there. Respect personal space of people in the Canadian workforce. Moving right along, maybe. I had to bring this one up because I'm asked about this a lot. Why do Canadians say I'm sorry so much? Sorry, I just had to get this. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Sorry, just give me 1 minute. I tried to count one time how many times I said sorry in the run of a day. I lost count. So Canadians say sorry a lot, but it has a different meaning than it does in other cultures. Actually, it has a dual meaning. Sorry in conversations is just an embedded part of our dialect and conversation here. Sorry can be a conversation starter. It can be the end of a sentence. It can be embedded in a couple of places in the same conversation. But it's also used for its formal purpose where you're apologizing for something. And usually you can tell the difference right away. So we do say sorry a lot. It's good to know that it's not associated with, any sort of organizational hierarchy. You're going to get the president of a company saying sorry as much as you're going to get an intern who just started their brand new job on day one. It's just part of a culture of politeness that we are very, very guilty of. And I threw this in. Most people probably don't even know they're saying it. I know that I don't. So when you hear somebody say sorry to you 15 times a day, they're not really apologizing. It's just part of them showing you respect and being polite. Okay, this is a big one. This is where I find there's a big cultural difference in Canada and a lot of other countries, not just a couple. The myth is that work is everything. In Canada, work is not everything. It's actually really low on people's value list when you talk about the grand scheme of things. The things that are more important than work are your family, having time to relax, your mental health, me time, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it's just time by yourself to do things that you like to do, even without your family. Having a job that fits your life. And this is, again, I'm going to keep tying this back to those earlier parts of the session where I said, really look at a job. Is that something you want to do, or is it just a paycheck? If it's just a paycheck, you're probably not going to be as happy as it is if it's something that you really, really are passionate about. So it's important to keep this in mind, because if you're new to Canada or you're just starting your first job in Canada, this could be a big adapting point for you to remember. I don't have to work 75 hours a week. It's okay that I go home at the end of the day. It's okay that I miss a meeting to go to my son's graduation, because that's more important in my life. It's okay for me to schedule vacation when I need to take vacation with my family, and so on and so forth. Of course, there's that's within reason. It doesn't mean that every Canadian is out there just blowing off work and all that kind of stuff, but it is just a general part of the cultural norms here that it is family first, health first, mental health first, take a break. Um, and and that for those of you who are managers or you're interested in being managers and that's on your career path, this is something that's really important to keep in mind. As leaders and managers, we want to be able to foster healthy, successful employees in the workplace where they know that they're valued and they know that their employer cares, that they have a proper work-life balance and that work isn't everything. Okay. Yep. Myth number 7, your opinion doesn't matter. We will bust that myth because your opinion really matters. People always want to hear what you have to say. You don't have to be in a certain rank in an organization to bring an idea to the table. If someone asks you your opinion, they really want to know the answer. They're not just humoring you. Your opinion is as valuable as anybody else in the organization. That's a real thing. So don't be afraid to speak up in meetings. Don't be afraid to put your ideas forward. People genuinely want to know. That doesn't mean that all of your ideas are going to be what happens, but it's just fosters a collaborative and team working environment when people are all kind of throwing things into the circle. And that ties into that teamwork culture that we talked about a few minutes ago. Myth number 8, being on time is for suckers. This is another really big one. Punctuality is one of the highest values I think you'll find in the Canadian workplace. And that goes beyond the workplace. It happens in school as well. I remember being in school, and if my teacher or my professor was 15 minutes late for a class, the class walked out because it was just expected that you're on time or this isn't happening. The same is the case in the workplace. If you're running late for a meeting, of course, you send a message ahead and say, I'm running late, I'm caught in traffic, my car broke down, whatever. That's more acceptable. But if you just stroll into something 15 minutes late, chances are they'll have left by then. So that's more than just the interview, which I would argue is one of the most important times for you to be on time. But being on time, respecting other people's time, it's a really very high valued part of our culture here. And if you're late one time, or if you're late chronically, it's a serious sign of disrespect for your peers, for your employer, for whoever it is that you are late to meet with. We're almost at the end. Myth number 9, it's rude to be direct and honest. Not true. In this culture, it's better for you to give an honest, direct answer to something. Don't be a jerk about it. But if I say to you, should we go with this design or abandon it altogether? Give an answer. Don't say, well, maybe, I don't know. What do you think? The polite rudeness is an actual thing in Canada and it's acceptable. So if you want to know my opinion or my answer on something, ask me and I'm going to give you an honest answer. Again, doesn't have to be rude. It doesn't have to be disrespectful, but it is actually showing a sign of respect when you give somebody your honest opinion or an honest answer to what they're asking. And finally, in Canada, there is equality for no one. This is the final myth that we're busting. Equality is ingrained in the Canadian culture. Despite all that stuff that happened in the 70s, Canada is a very welcoming place. We'd love to have all different cultures, all different races. I think it's what makes Canada so strong is that we do have that in the workplace, or even outside of the workplace. It's actually illegal in this country to discriminate based on age, gender, sexual orientation, race. It's against the law. And there is a culture of respect here that is, I would say, paid to human beings, regardless of who that person is. And I have found that through my entire career. It's not happened very often that I was discriminated against for being young or for being a woman or, you know, whatever the person didn't like about me. But for the most part, this is a workplace where people are respected for who they are, not any of the other attributes about them. Follow the golden rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated, and that will get you far. So that's all our myths. Last section is just, if you have any questions for me, it could be on anything that I just spewed out to you as fast as I possibly could, or anything else that you just genuinely want to know about.
Wow. Thank you, Heather, for that. And there are some of the myths that you busted that made me laugh, but I just couldn't distract. So it was really quite interesting. The sorry one was something that really catches my attention. Also, as a Nigerian, also Canadian too, we say sorry a lot, but we say sorry in a different context. So
Right.
maybe something happens, someone gets injured or something, we say sorry. And I hear Canadians say, oh, but it's not your fault. I'm like, I know, I'm just saying sorry just to sympathize with you, you know? So I do understand that sometimes we say sorry, but it means something completely different depending on the culture that you are
That's right.
in. So I don't have any questions, but I can open the floor up if anyone has anything to ask Heather. I like a title, Ask a Canadian. So if you have something to ask, she's very willing to answer. Let me see if I have any hands raised up. Coming. Okay, we don't have any questions now. Okay, yeah. T4, I know your name is not T4, but you can unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Tony calling from Moncton in New Brunswick.
Hello.
I must apologize. I came in a little bit late. I got the invite just as it came around. So I think I missed a little bit on the interview aspect because really I'm preparing for one in less than 48 hours. So I'm having this issue of, will I call it fright? I feel scared, like fear of rejection or fear of not being capable or being adequate enough to meet the possible questions that I could be asked on the interview stage. So I'm kind of looking for a kind of a confidence boost and what I need to do to boost my confidence on what I'm going out for. That's just about it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I can start by saying you're worth it. You'll do it. You're going to do great. I don't think that's what you were asking me for. So part of what we talked about when we went back, I can go back to the interview part just in case. Just in case you missed this part, but it's really not about this slide. It's about the amount of preparation that you do and the job that it is that you've applied for. So one of the things that we talked about early on was about, instead of applying for, I used an example of if 25 jobs are posted that day, don't apply for all of them because you're not going to be qualified for all of them. Really look into the job description, map your own skills and qualifications to that. I think it's normal for every person, whether they're immigrating to a new country or not, to feel a little bit like, I don't think I'm good enough for that job, or I don't know if I meet all of those skills. And maybe you don't. But the important thing is that you build your own confidence internally by recognizing which parts of that job you know you can do really well, and be able to translate your experience into that job. So the example that I gave was, if you have 10 years of experience as a project manager in the banking industry, and you're applying for a project management position in IT, those are transferable skills. Project management and business analysis in particular, in my opinion, is a generalized skill set that can be adapted and applied into most, if not all, industries. So hone in on that. Look at the job description, do your research on the company, know what they're about, try to get an idea of what their values are, so that when you are answering those questions, you have really prepared and done your research on yourself to say, they're going to ask me questions about my experience managing a high-level technology project, if this is the IT job. I was in banking, but an equivalent project that I did where I led 12 people and it was a 2-year-long project and I had a budget of $5 million, I was really successful in delivering that with this skill, this skill, this skill, this skill. So it's really about being confident in your own skills and abilities and knowing how they map into that job, so that you can answer the questions from a place of real secure knowledge about yourself, and not just be like, oh my God, there's no way I can answer that question, and then just ramble on for 10 minutes. Does that help?
Yes, that did. At least I have like 24 hours to put myself all together so that I can be well prepared for that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Heather, for that. We have Sandra. Sandra, can you go on with your question? Sandra, you are still muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Heather, for that wonderful session. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question in the information we just got from this wonderful session. How do you excel, say, on a new role the first 30 days, I would say, or 60 days, incorporating all this information you have beautifully laid out? What additional?
You've broken up a little bit, but I think what you're asking is, how do you excel once you've got the job in your first 30 to 60 days? How do you thrive there?
Sandra, your line is breaking, really breaking. I think there's a lag from my end. But Sandra, I think Heather got the question, so she'll answer it now.
Yeah, I did get the question. So, you know, you've gone through the interview, you got the job, and now in your first couple of months, for a lot of people, that's a scary place to be because it's a new organization, it's a new culture you're not familiar with, you know, but a couple of things to keep in mind. You got the job, so that hopefully gives you confidence to at least walk through the front door in the first couple of days of your job. You were the successful candidate over lots of others who also interviewed for that same job. That means that the organization wants you there, values what you bring to the table, and is looking forward to bringing you into the team. So in your first month, I think the best possible thing that you can do goes back to some of the other, this is just a very short list of ways to be successful in those early days, but I would focus a lot on the asking questions, asking for help. Like I said earlier, it's a cultural norm that people are going to start in a new place and they're going to have 1,000 questions. It's expected that you ask them. Whether that's to your supervisor or to your peers or the person you share an office with or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just ask questions. And if there's something that you don't know how to do, don't be embarrassed about that. Ask. This is what you've asked me to do. I've never quite done that before. Could you show me what you're expecting? And I will go and do that. So that's one thing. The other thing is this relationship building, soft skills, you know, the ability to kind of, I don't want to say the word network because that has a connotation of external, you know, looking for jobs and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, internal networking, you know, figure out who the players are in your workplace. There's often times where, you know, the communication style will be different depending on which person you're speaking with. Learn who are people who can make or break your success in the organization. I don't mean that as negative as it sounds, but there are people in every organization that have higher influence over success than other people do. So it's good to learn who all the players are. And the third thing I would say is align yourself with your team. Like we talked about earlier, team culture is very highly valued in the Canadian workplace. And so whether we all like it or not, the people who are on our team are the people we're going to spend a lot of our time with. So start working with them, ask them questions, see if they want to go for lunch on the first Friday, start to get to know them. And that's when you can get into a place where really building that team culture is going to help you be successful, because your success is going to be dependent on how successful that team is.
Great answer, Heather. Thank you for that. We have a couple of other questions. I'll quickly go to them. Demi, I'll get to you. Just be patient. Let me just take some of these questions. The first one is, there's this emphasis on having Canadian work experience to be considered for white-collar jobs. Is this a myth, or what exactly is it? That question is from Kaya.
That's an excellent question. My first answer is going to be, unfortunately, I think that would depend on the employer. So I can only speak to my own experience, and I'll tie it into what I talked about earlier about your ability to translate your experience into the job that you're applying for or starting. And that goes for experience in other countries as well. In my opinion, as a hiring manager, it doesn't matter where the experience happened, as long as the experience is relevant to the job that I'm hiring for. Other hiring managers might feel different, and you may be asking that question because you've had that experience so far. So ways to overcome that, I think if you're really invested in what this job is, what they're asking for, you align yourself with the values and the culture of that company, and you can present yourself in such a way that you can very specifically give examples of your experience and how it translates into what they want and need you to do. It shouldn't matter what country that experience was gained in. I don't know if that's a good enough answer.
Yeah, I think that that works, because at the end of the day, there's really no straitjacket answer to this. I think it depends on the that particular job, and depends on the organizational culture. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the bottom line for me, because I can only speak to my own experience, is that I'm more interested in you telling me how you know how to do this job.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you did a similar job in Nigeria or Japan or Texas, as long as you can say, oh, in my former position, I did a project very similar to that. Here was how I was successful in it. Here's how I engaged the stakeholders. Here, you know, then that should transcend across borders, because experience is experience is experience.
Yeah, and that speaks a lot to the transferable skills. I think that's also something you're saying. So
yeah,
especially in the tech environment.
Yeah.
Okay, Kaya has another question. He says, does having Canadian academic qualification enhance one's chances of landing a job?
Again, I can only speak to my experience as a hiring manager. And I will answer it to say, in general, no. If you have an undergraduate Bachelor of Commerce from Canada, from the US, from Germany, as long as it's an accredited university and you've got your degree and everything on there, that part doesn't matter, because internationally degrees are fairly transferable. An undergraduate level degree is what it is. Where I find that we run into problems is if there's ambiguity when you're presenting your education. So, sometimes a job will ask for a master's degree or equivalent, or, something along those lines. It's important in those situations that if it is an international program or academic accreditation of some sort, that you can outline exactly what that is. So it doesn't have to be from Canada, but the hiring manager needs to understand what that education is and just take the ambiguity out of it. And there's been a lot of times where I'm reading a resume going, I don't know if this person has a degree because of the way they've presented it, or, and then at other times a person doesn't have a degree, but they very clearly articulate, I've got a diploma in this from this college, I have a certificate in this from this place, and this is what, being clear and really documenting your education is more important to me than the country that the education comes from.
Beautiful. So would you say, just a follow-up question to that, would you say if on your resume you should have your qualification, maybe the university and the country, or you think that really doesn't matter? Taking out, should there really be the country there?
I guess it depends. I don't think it helps or hinders either way, but again, this is my own perspective, so keep that in mind with everything. I'm not answering for every Canadian employer.
Yeah.
I'm answering for how I review these things, but definitely to know what the university is. And sometimes it helps, like if it's a university that might not be familiar to the employer, to know where that is could help them kind of, again, that's just more information that will help them understand where the education is from. I wouldn't say it's a requirement though, yeah.
Okay, great. We have another
Sorry,
question.
I have one more answer on that.
Okay.
In my opinion, what's more important than the country is when you did that degree.
Oh.
Sometimes people leave that out. And I'm not saying that a 25-year-old bachelor degree is not relevant. But sometimes, you have a hard time piecing together an education and work timeline if people don't put their years that they did that, or year graduated, or year of completion, or what have you. So that is important.
Awesome. Okay. Also, I want, we have run out of our time. We're already 8 minutes over, but it's getting interesting. But I have a question. Moreover, you also mentioned about keeping to time as part of the Canadian way of doing things. So please just bear with us. We have 2 more questions, but I have one I want to ask. Either some cultures are very particular about eye contact, so making eye contact. So some cultures, making eye contact is a sign of disrespect to your boss, but you go for an interview and you are trying your best not to make eye contact with everybody asking you the questions. how is that seen in the Canadian workplace when you go to an interview, or even when you get the job? What do Canadians think about making eye contact? Is it opposite? Is it respectful to not to make eye contact? What do you think?
It's the opposite. I should have put that as a myth. I have it on one of the slides about showing respect is making direct eye contact, because it is. So much so that if I'm meeting you for the first time, or I'm interviewing you, or whatever the situation is, and you're constantly averting my look, I'm wondering what's wrong with you. And I'm not kidding, because if you can't look somebody in the eye, and I can appreciate how this could be a 180-degree shift from a lot of cultures where direct eye contact is not the norm, but it is in Canada. And so if you can't make eye contact, or you won't make eye contact with somebody that you're in a conversation with, in an interview with, not only is a sign of disrespect, but people will think that you're shifty. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know, that you're hiding something, right? Which is kind of a body language thing here that I guess I've never really thought about. But if I'm lying to somebody, I'm far less likely to meet their eye. My children do this to me all the time, which is why I'm saying this. If my son is telling me something and he's telling me like this, then I know he's lying, because he's not meeting my eyes. So definitely, and if you're in an interview with multiple people, this is a skill that a lot of people have a hard time with, whether, again, you're an immigrant or you were born in Canada. If you're being interviewed by 4 people, practice this. When you're talking, shift your eye focus to all of them. It doesn't have to be equally spaced. It doesn't have to be a formula, but make sure you're connecting with each of them with eye contact, because then they know you're engaged and you're listening and you're present in the conversation. That's a big one.
Yeah, and I'm glad I asked that. And you know what? I know we have other questions, but
don't worry about my time. I actually thought this was scheduled until 9. So I've done to time.
Okay, so let me take David's question. We have just 2 more questions, and after that, someone that raised his or her hand, I just don't know who that is. If you still have a question, you can raise your hand and we can take it. In the meantime, I will take, is any hand raised?
Yeah.
Demi.
Demi,
can you take your question while then I'll take the other ones?
Okay, hello. Thank you for speaking to us today. So the question I had was regarding having any work experience at all, in how to sell yourself to potential employers without having prior work experience. Like, you're fresh out of school, maybe not, like in my case, not having done a co-op just due to the circumstances. And just really, how would I let an employer know that despite the fact I don't have any actual work experience, I do have sound technical skills and I can back that up?
Yeah, so I think that's the quandary that most people fresh out of school face, right? Because you need experience to get a job, but you can't build experience without the job. And that's just this constant circle that new grads find themselves in all the time. Some people just get lucky and they end up in an entry-level position or what have you, but that's becoming less and less common. So what I would tell you is apply for the right level of job in the first place. So oftentimes I will have people apply for a job that is looking for 10 to 12 years of programming experience, for example. Those are probably not the jobs that you want to apply for. And I have found a shift in, I'm going to be generalist here, just in certain demographics or generations. I don't know what it is, but we get a lot of applicants that are fresh out of school that are applying for like director level positions. And I'm always first of all, kind of thrown off by that. But second of all, I'm really impressed by that because I'm like, wow, like you just go for that. Just don't expect to get that job. But anyway, back to your question. There's a lot of things that you can do if you're applying for a job that's in your field that you know you've got the technical skills for. Really work on your soft skills, the relationship building, the networking, meeting people, introducing yourself into different industries or workplaces that you want to do. Look for an entry opportunity. So at Dalhousie, for example, we have a hiring program that is just temporary employment for people who have skills that want to come into Dal and then kind of branch off somewhere in the university when another like full-time job is posted. That's a great way to get into a company. But also focus on like I said earlier, translatable skills. It's actually a skill in and of itself to be able to present those to a potential employer. And translatable skills don't have to necessarily be from another job. They could be from your academic experience, from a project that you worked on as a student. Anything that you can take and say, in my third year of this, I was responsible for a full term project where I managed a budget. I had to, anything that you can capture from your experience in general, whether that's a part-time job, an academic job, or whatever. Find ways to hone in on what's being asked in the job description and map yourself to that. I'm looking for somebody who has experience leading a technology project, blah, 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 blah. In my fourth year before I graduated, I led a technology project that involved 27 stakeholders. I was responsible for these key elements. It was successfully delivered. There are ways that you can have and display your experience without it being a job. Because employers know new grads don't have 10 years of experience. What they're looking for is, are you teachable? How quickly are you going to learn this? What was your academic experience like? Do you have those soft skills? Are you going to be a good team member? Is your personality a good fit for this team? And that's that emphasis on the team culture. So anything you can do to sell yourself in those areas, and be mindful to apply for jobs that you know you can do.
Great. Demi, I know that you got a lot of insights from that. If you have more questions on that, you could send an email to us, carrieraid@gmail.com. And if we need to talk to people in the industry and find a way to help, we are always willing to just find ways to help people that are trying to get some level of experience. Thank you for that, Heather. Now, let me go to the questions that have been posted. David said, if you newly get a project manager position or role, what questions can you ask your team individually to get to know them without sounding like you are intruding into their privacy?
Well, don't ask their underwear size because they probably won't answer. So, sorry, but sorry, not sorry, not sorry.
Canadian, sorry.
But I'm sorry. That's a great question. And it's a place that I've been many times. I've had several different project management jobs before I went into more of a management role. And it's a really interesting question because, as you all know, those of you who are in the project management space, your success as a project manager fundamentally rests on the shoulders of the team that is working on that project with you or for you.
Yeah.
So when you're starting a new project management position, the best thing you can do is to get to know them as people. And you don't have to ask, what's your religion? How much money do you make? And how much does your house cost? Those are the things that you probably never will talk to about those. But how long have you worked here? What's your favorite thing about working here? What's the best part of this project? If it's a project you're coming in mid-flight, why do you like working at this place? Where are you from? Oh, you're from Cape Breton? Oh, great. I have an uncle who lived there. Like, just get into regular conversations, because you're going to be spending an awful lot of time with these people. The other thing that you can do outside of the kind of more personal relationship building is focus in on the work, particularly for those who have been in the role for a long time. Ask them questions, like that slide said. Ask for questions, ask questions, ask for help. Ask about the culture, ask about what happened the last time we did a project like this, and try to get a real understanding of how the team works, how projects are delivered, what's the methodology in place there. Have you ever done an agile project? I have a lot of experience with that. Maybe I can help you do that sometime. That kind of stuff, I think, would really go a long way to help you kind of break that ice, particularly if you're coming into a project that you're not starting from the beginning, which I know happens a lot in project management roles. You kind of come in mid-flight and you're just kind of shoved into the middle of a team and something that's already underway. So get to know them and get to know the work and the environment, so that you can also be successful and bring your own skills into the fold, to help them.
Great, thanks, Heather, for that. This is for BC. You were asking that Heather go to the first slide on cover letters, but I just want to say that this is on YouTube, so you can go watch it there. I don't think she should go through everything because of time. We've exceeded our time, and I'm just trying to be careful of that. Someone is joining from the UK, and right now it should be almost midnight there. So
I think he's probably sleeping.
I hope not.
No, I'm here.
So,
It's past midnight, by the way.
Okay, so just for your sake, you can watch the recording on YouTube, but I just want to be careful of different people and their time. So
yes. I'll say one thing about cover letters, because I only briefly touched on it when I was going through this particular slide. I'm not going to go through this whole slide again, to Harry's point, but just something to keep in mind is cover letters, in my opinion, are essential. They are the place where you actually tell the employer who you are and why you're here. And that's how you answer these 5 W's, because if I'm going through 150 applications, which I've done many, many, many times, if there's no cover letter, I don't know anything about this person. Yes, I can read their university degrees. Yes, I can see what companies they work for. I don't know who they are. I don't know why they're applying for this job. I don't know why they want to work at Dalhousie. I don't know if they just moved to Canada and they're very excited to be here, and they, that's the stuff that you need to put in a cover letter. And I personally, myself, I would never apply for a job without a cover letter, because that's how you get yourself across, not your work experience and education.
Great. Ella, thank you for graciously attending to that. Okay, Chiku, you can ask your question now.
Good afternoon from here. Okay, thank you for your presentation. My question is this. During your interviews, probably the hiring manager now asks you, okay, do you have other organizations that you're interviewing with? Are you expecting a job offer? Have you concluded on any of the offers? So how is a dicey question. So how do you respond to such a situation?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I have never asked that question. Are you asking, as the person being interviewed, would you ask the employer that, or as the interviewer, would I ask you that?
No, the interviewer,
yeah,
asking the candidate, okay, do you have offers are you interviewing with other organizations?
It's so interesting because I would say I would never ask that, but clearly you're asking the question because you might probably have been asked it before. How I would answer that? Well, going back to that slide about Canadians value privacy and personal space and all of that kind of stuff, my gut instinct is it's kind of none of their business. However, if you're going to be polite and professional, I think you would base that on the specific situation. So if this is a job that you would love to have and you just like, this is it, this is the job I want, it couldn't hurt to say that, something like, I have applied for other jobs. This is the one that I have spent my effort and focus on because this is the one that really speaks to me. It aligns with my own values. And this is a place I can see myself being very successful. So you can kind of answer their question in a roundabout way. If it's a very direct question of, do you have any other job offers? I think it's just really up to your discretion whether you want to be truthful about that or not. I know that I talked about how Canadian workplace values direct answers and honesty, but I think you have to judge the situation on your own experience at the time. Have you been looking for a job for 3 months or a year? Or is this the first time you've applied for a job? There's a lot of nuanced factors that would come into how you would answer that question. So be as honest as you can without betraying yourself and the process that you're currently going through. Don't know if that's a very good answer either, but I'll go back to my original. I can't believe people would ask that, but
exactly. I almost said the same.
Yeah, I get that question almost all the days that I go for interviews.
Wow.
Oh,
I do.
that's
So
amazing.
sometimes they want to see whether you are desperate, or sometimes they want to see whether you are interested in the organization. I love your response. To be honest, your response sounds very good.
Okay.
It's better to say, oh, fine, okay, I'm actually interviewing with other organizations, but I find your organization more interesting to me as it aligns more to my career path. I think that's a very good answer.
Well, that's right. And you also have to be respectful and truthful to yourself, right? Because if you've applied for 5 jobs, you may be more interested in 2 or 3 of them, but at the end of the day, you still need a job. So you also kind of want to keep your options open, because you might get 2 job offers from different companies. And at that level, it's up to your discretion whether you tell the potential employer that you have another offer. But honestly, that is more appropriate to come at a time where you're given an offer. Like if you interviewed with me and I was preparing an offer for you, that would be a good time to say, I'm also entertaining an offer from another company. Again, I'm passionate about this one. I'd really like to see what you're presenting, in a respectful, polite, professional way. But I think that's a more appropriate time for that conversation to happen. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Sorry, can I chip in 1 or 2 things again, please? I know we are already.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know. It might also help someone in this group. Another dicey questions they usually ask again is your compensation, your salary. I feel when an organization is recruiting, a reputable organization, they already have a benchmark for their salary. So asking a candidate again, okay, what is their salary expectation? Most times when you go above their salary expectation, they don't call you back. And you go below the salary expectation, it looks as if you are too desperate. So in this case, how do you deal with that issue?
I tell you, man, that is one of the hottest topics in all employment. It doesn't matter what country it is, but it's big in Canada too. So I consider myself fortunate that I'm a hiring manager at Dalhousie because every single job we post has the salary range in it. It's publicly available. Harry would know this.
Yes.
It's right there. the salary range for this job is $67,000 to $79,000 a year. Boom. If you want to work for this job, that's the amount of money that you're going to make. So there's really no real negotiation. It's a tough one if you're asked what your salary expectations are, particularly in the first interview. I'll go back to, if this were me, I would never ask that. I don't think that's an appropriate time, but that's not what you're asking me. So what I have been asked that question before earlier in my career, and how I've always answered it is, I would expect to be compensated in the standard industry compensation for a job similar to this, with this number of years experience or whatever, which some people might not be happy with that particular answer. But like you said, if you say, I'd like to make $120,000 a year, they're going to say, oh, we can't hire this person. If you say, I'd like to make $50,000 a year, they're going to say, why aren't they asking for more money or whatever? So it's important to try to find a place in the middle, try to follow some sort of standard if that's applicable. I know the Project Management Institute issues an international or global salary survey. Couldn't help you beforehand to look into that, or look around at other jobs that are posted in a similar industry and try to get a range that you would be comfortable falling into. I would just avoid saying things like, I wouldn't take this job for less than $70,000, or, you know, kind of in an ultimatum type of way, but make it conversational, and wherever possible, look at what else is happening with similar jobs in the industry.
Beautiful. Thank you, Heather, for that. I was just about to ask that question on salary, so you've handled that. We don't have any other questions, and I think, okay, one more is it okay for a recruiter to ask about your current salary? Is it legal for a recruiter to ask? Is it appropriate? So
I don't think it's illegal. The question of whether it's appropriate, I think it would depend. So again, my own opinion, there should have been a disclaimer on the bottom of every slide. This is Heather Fraser's opinion, and she does not represent the values of every Canadian on the planet. But I think it depends on if you're talking about a recruiter or an employer. So if it's a recruiter and you're working with them, for example, I don't know if that's the situation you're talking about, but if I'm working through a recruiter to help find employment for me, that's appropriate to talk about what your salary expectations are, because they are going out and looking for jobs that would be suitable to bring you to. So if you are looking for a job that your last job paid you $80,000 a year, and you know that that's where your family and lifestyle and everything else is going to align with, that's an easy conversation to have with a recruiter. At the employment/interview level, it's a little bit different, because I don't think it's appropriate, as if I am as a hiring manager says to somebody in an interview, what did you make at your last job? That's not appropriate. And then that kind of gets into this borderline area of the personal space, privacy of information thing, where people generally tend to not talk about their salaries here. I lived my entire life, I never knew how much my father made. My children don't know how much money I make. That's just kind of the way we do things here. And so if it's a direct contact that is aiding in your employment prospects, yes, that's an appropriate conversation. If it's a prospective employer, no, it's not.
I think that's a very wise answer. And I have a question, but I'm not going to ask because of time. So I want to really appreciate Heather for this excellent presentation. I like the meats that you busted. I enjoyed the tips and tricks that you gave. The eye contact one was a very important one to me, because, you know, if you're not sure of, you know, I've never heard anybody speak about it. So that was good. And I also know so many people here, we have messages, Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Heather. So I think people really appreciate the session. And if you've not posted anything, please just post and let's show some love to Heather. Where just so she knows that the work she put into this was worth it. And I know so many of us have gained a lot. I have gained, and so many other people have gained. So thank you, Heather. And I don't know, I think if you don't mind, if you can turn on your video, let's just take a quick picture and just to the family. We have this webinar, I think bi-weekly, but now it's summer, so it's difficult to get speakers to come. So this when we get back in September. So if you have your makeup on and you're okay with turning on your video, you can put it on. Let's take a quick picture with Heather and we can call it a day. Okay, yes. If I'll just give a few more seconds, turn on if you want to put on your makeup. Oh, Lara,
KA
I
is
see
in
your
the UK.
baby.
He's lying on a pillow. KA is. He might not want to be on the screen.
Okay. Okay, yeah, okay. Well, a few more seconds. Yes, T4, you had one lying on your pillow. Oh, Sandra, good to see you. So just a few more seconds.
Thank
Let's
you.
take a quick video. Sorry, a quick picture, and we'll call it a day for today. So I'll give like 10 more seconds, and then we can take this picture. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Oh, Kenny, you just came on. Okay, let's quickly do that. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. And you get our emails. And I'll leave the last word to Heather.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night / afternoon / rest of your week.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.